This is the D6 generation.
Dice are our vice.
Creating not too horrible content since 2008.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Oh, I think we're well past that. Hey, welcome to another episode of the D6 generation. I am excited to have a very special guest here with me today. My daughter, Kit. How you doing, Kit?
I'm doing good.
Great. We're excited to talk about today something we've both been playing a lot of, and that, of course, is Baldur's Gate 3.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Now, how many current campaigns are you participating in Baldur's Gate 3, the video game?
I think I have at least 70 hours on the game, and it's all within 4 different campaigns, so I have not completed even Act 1 of the game.
Right, so 70 hours in 4 different campaigns, and really like the first 20 hours.
The first
4
20
times,
hours in the game,
10 hours.
like 4 times.
And I'm about the same. I think I have about, not quite as many hours as you, but I have like 4 or 5 campaigns going on. And so I thought it might be fun to share because a lot of people are talking about it. Maybe a lot of people haven't gotten into it yet. Not sure if it's worth the time or the money. And I just kind of want to start off by talking about like what was our anticipation level for this thing? Because you and I have been playing 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons since it came out. Since you were like, I don't know, 10?
10-ish, somewhere in there.
So right when it came out, we started playing 5th edition. And then we also played Larian, who's the company that makes the publisher who made Baldur's Gate 3. They also have been doing turn-based video game RPG combat games for a while now. We played Divinity 2 to the end. And how many times did you play through Divinity 2?
I only played through Divinity 2 one time in its entirety. I had multiple campaigns, but I only finished one because it's hard. It's a really hard game.
It's hard. Yeah. So Divinity, but we knew what to expect from Divinity, right? And we knew how Larian designs their games. And we obviously love the Dungeons & Dragons world and Faerun and the Sword Coast and all that stuff. So what was your anticipation level when you heard Baldur's Gate 3 was coming? Were you like super excited? Were you nervous? Did you think they're going to do a good job with it?
I was excited and I was also nervous. I don't really like turn-based combat that much. Even for D&D, I was like, I love Divinity, but I don't know if I can go through that again.
Right.
Having to redo some of those fights over and over just to get the right rolls in the right situations, it's tough. And I was like, Divinity was great, but it had its flaws where they had to fix the ending of the game because it was so difficult. People couldn't get through it. And I was like, what if I play Baldur's Gate and the same thing happens again? So I was really scared to get invested in a game that I was like, what if it's balanced badly again? But it's been really good so far. And I was like, oh, those fears were unfounded. It's very good.
We've been very lucky because I was worried about that too. And with Divinity 2, I got lucky because I started playing it on PC. And I know you and your sister got pretty far through it, started to run some trouble. So I took a break from it. Then I know they patched it, came out on the Xbox, and I played through it again on the Xbox and had a great time. And Rose, my older daughter, your sister, she picked on me because I got through the easy ending. So she thought that was lame.
Yeah, because we both had
she got through the hard ending.
We had to turn down the difficulty just for the last battle because it was so difficult.
So I was a little nervous. And we also stayed away from, I don't think either of us, because they released Act 1 of this game, Baldur's Gate 3, almost 2 years ago now. It seems like a while ago. And we didn't, at least a year, maybe longer.
There's been stuff for years because every so often I'll look up something about the game and I'll get Reddit posts from like 4 years ago.
Right.
I'm like,
so
I don't know if people were playing this.
It's been anticipated. You could try it a long time ago, quite a bit. And so I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to. So I stayed away from that though, because I was afraid of it. I'd get in it, I'd love it, and you get to the end of Act 1 and you're stuck.
And then you're stuck, and then you have to redo it all over again.
So we avoided it, but we did right the week before it came out. We realized you could buy it early
and
start playing with the early release version and not to pay again for the final version. So we did that, and we started playing Act 1 a little bit. So that's actually another version we had because your saves didn't transfer across.
So I guess
we
I
threw
have
that
5
away.
campaigns.
So I guess 5 if you count that a little bit. And what was your feeling when you played sort of the pre-release version? Because it did change a little bit between the pre-release and the final. Was there were you excited after you played the pre-release? Did it move some of your fears away? Or were you like, I don't know, still on the edge?
I think there's like a very obvious tutorial piece at the start of Baldur's Gate where it's very clearly not the whole world. And that's pretty much all we did, I think, in the pre-release stuff. So I don't think my standards really changed. I didn't really mess around that much with the pre-release stuff. I'm sure they did change things, but me personally, I didn't notice much of a difference because I didn't do that.
But did you get more excited after playing the pre-release a little bit? You're like, this is going to be good?
Yes, because of character creation. We did get to do the whole character creation.
Yeah, so let's talk about character creation. So the first thing that's interesting, and if you played Divinity 2, they did copy one aspect of Divinity 2 I thought was really fascinating. So apparently it's a Larian thing now, because it's 2 games in a row I've noticed this, where there's pre-generated NPCs that are going to be a major part of the story, right? And when you create your character, you can choose to either play one of the pre-generated NPCs.
You can do that in Divinity?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot.
Or you could create your whole new character. And in Divinity, you almost wanted to play a pre-gen because they had a full backstory that would fold into the story more. And if you played your own, you didn't really get that so much. But in this game, Larian made sort of a big deal that like whatever you pick, down to your subclass, down to your sub, I think they call it subspecies now, not subrace anymore. But that all will matter, and the game will reflect that.
It's really cool. In one of my campaigns, I'm playing a tiefling druid, and there's a specific situation in the game with both tieflings and druids, and I've gotten dialogue options that are specifically for being a tiefling druid. I have another campaign where I'm a paladin, and not only is there voice choices that you get just because you're a paladin, there's also choices you get specifically because of the oath you chose as your certain paladin class.
Yeah.
So everything matters that you picked.
Everything matters. Yeah, it really does, which is really fascinating. And not only for voice choices, like I'm walking in, it's really fascinating. Like we're walking into, this isn't really a spoiler, there's a goblin camp, right? At some point, there's a goblin camp. And I happen to choose to play, there's a lot of different playable, I'm probably going to keep calling them races, even though they're switching to species here in the new version of Dungeons & Dragons.
Is that what they're called now?
Yeah, they're going to be called species, I believe. And I think Larian just said they're going to flip it with a patch, so it'll be species instead of race. But in any case, so I chose to play a drow elf, right? And they already have, which is really cool, they have a lot of the newer sub-races in Baldur's Gate 3, so you can be the, there's not just drow loyal to Loth anymore. You can play those, which are sort of the drow that are, I don't know about evil, but they worship the spider goddess and all that. Or I think they're not called sun, but they're like the lighter drow elves, which is interesting. They're the good guys. The gooder, yeah, the less different god, right? So I'm playing him, but when you walk into the goblin camp, the goblins are all worshiping me because I'm a drow, and they're all like, "Oh, drow, that's higher on the food chain of evil bad guys." So
in my campaign, I had to fight through those camps, and then I walk into the camp with my dad's campaign, and they're like, "Now you're good to go.
Good. Come on in, Your Highness. Come on." And I'm like, "Whoa!" So it's like it's not even just dialogue choices; it's like the entire situation you're in is completely solvable differently depending on some of this stuff, which is fascinating. But let's walk through just actually creating the character. You're jumping in there. You're obviously a 5e veteran, and you're like, all right, does this feel like Dungeons & Dragons when you're creating your character?
Yes, I think it does. If you've played The Sims, if you're a Sims person, character creation feels exactly like that. You get to do all the details. People have modded it out so you can add all sorts of fancier stuff. But it's very in-depth, and you get to do classes and subclasses, and if you've played D&D, you'll know exactly what's going on. If you haven't played D&D, there's not really a tutorial, so right. you'll figure it out as you go. But if you like D&D, it's exactly like making D&D character.
Yeah, and the not only the character customization, i.e. the visuals of the character. And one of the things that's really fascinating too about how they did this game, it is a for the most part top-down isometric view, meaning like it's up above your character most of the game, kind of looking down upon you, right? Almost like if you imagine miniatures on the tabletop when you play D&D in person, that kind of a view the whole time. And it's a tactical turn-based combat. Think about games like XCOM and stuff. So it's that view a lot. So you might think, well, how I make my character look exactly and worrying about nose piercings and ear piercings and everything else. And there's cool stuff. Like when you're creating your character, some of the piercing options vary depending on, like if you pick the barbarian who's a different barbarian. I forget what they call them for barbarians. Are they?
It's the subclasses, I think.
Yeah, types of barbarians. They have different earring options to match, to kind of show off their, which is cool, which is like super cool. That happened to like level 3 or something. So like really cool little like visual cues, and you're like, well, no one will see that because you're going to be super. But actually, that's not true. You can zoom in very tight, and during all the conversations, it of course zooms in on your character and zooms in on the people you're talking to.
And in certain scenes too, like you'll see your whole party standing behind you, so it does matter how everyone in your party is dressed.
Yes.
If you make bad choices, they'll ruin good scenes.
You'll regret that. And another interesting part of character creation, in addition to, and Kit's right, you're picking your background, you're picking your class, you're picking your subclass, of course, you're picking all your spells, all your abilities. There's a few interesting things nuances you'll learn about the game as you play that aren't in this version of D&D, and I can't tell if these are just things that Larian decided to add to make it a little fun, or if we're getting a little preview of, I think, codename D&D 1 or D&D 2024, whatever the next edition of D&D is. And all we know about that is it's going to be backward compatible, so if you already own modules and content for D&D 5e, it's supposed to work with the next version of D&D, but they're going to tweak some stuff. So you definitely feel like you're playing 5e, but there's little things like, for example, as a fighter or a paladin or a barbarian or whatever, a longsword, if you're proficient in a weapon, there's different bonus actions you can do depending on the type of weapon you're wielding. So it's no, like cleave, for example, is not an ability fighters get. Cleave is something that if you have a two-handed weapon, like a battle axe, two-handed battle axe, or a two-handed sword, you can cleave. If you have a one-handed weapon, you can't cleave, but you can pommel strike with like a longsword, for example, as a bonus action that doesn't do as much damage, but has a chance to stun your opponent, maybe even knock him prone. So like the weapon you wield now has these little subtle side abilities. I don't know if they can do that in the tabletop version again. That'd be awesome, though. It really makes different kinds of swords and weapons feel a little more...
They have the same thing that D&D 5e has. Like, they still have finesse and stuff like that. So and all the mechanics are there. If you've played D&D, you'll know what's happening. They have inspiration, too. When you pick your background, you then get inspiration if you make choices that are in line with your background. The game doesn't tell you that you're going to get inspiration. Like, your DM wouldn't tell you beforehand you'll get inspiration for doing something. But if you choose to do something that's within your character, right, you'll see the little notification, and you get advantage on your next roll. So it's even like you have a little...
Inspiration is fantastic, the way they do it. And I don't know if this is a preview as well for D&D 1, but like the way it works is, as Kit just mentioned, right? So if you do something that's in line with your background, so for example, in that Goblin Camp example, on a different campaign I was playing, I'm a barbarian, and so I wiped them all out, and it's like, that's in line with your background of being a warrior, so you get a point of inspiration. Inspiration in 5e right now, each character can have one, kind of either have inspiration or they don't. You can't have more than 1 point or anything like that. In how it works in Baldur's Gate is inspiration... There's a party pool of inspiration.
And it's 4 because your party's 4.
Yeah, and it can be 4, but anybody can use it. It's just a pool. And that's becomes very important because of how conversations work in this game. So another thing that's really interesting about this game is that, I don't know how you feel about it, but I find the role playing outside of combat is even almost more compelling and interesting sometimes than the combat.
I think it is too. I do think it's funny that there's 2 things I think that don't happen in D&D that happen in this. First is they use guidance, which is a mechanic where you get a plus, like, I think it's a D4 or a D6 to whatever rolls you're making, and the rule is that the person has to cast the spell on you. But with how it works in Baldur's Gate, the bonus is pretty much just always there as long as the person's in your party. They could be halfway across the map and you're allowed to use guidance, and just poof, you get a plus D6 even though you're talking to a boss, and randomly your cleric just taps you on the shoulder, and it's like, you go for it. Also, when you engage with a dialogue with someone, it's only the person who's talking. So if you're playing online with multiple people, they can go run around and do stuff in the room or with the boss while you're talking with them, which is how you get situations where people will set up a ton of fire barrels or whatever and just immediately explode them and kill the boss because you're in dialogue with
there's
them.
Crazy stuff that can happen. Let's talk about the dialogue system for a minute. So in Baldur's Gate, like a lot of classic, like if you're familiar with like the BioWare games like Dragon Age or whatever, obviously you talk to an NPC, it zooms in, it shows their face, and you get a bunch of dialogue choices. They'll say something, you pick something to respond. But oftentimes, many of your response choices are either based, there'll be a little bracketed word in front of it. Like, because you're a barbarian, you can respond this way, or because you're a tiefling, you can respond that way, or because you have knowledge of arcana, you can respond this way. Many times they require a check. And even before you choose the choice, it's kind of cool. You can mouse over the check, and it'll tell you your bonus is right there.
So you don't have to know.
And here's the coolest part. You actually do the die roll. So if you click, let's say you want to try to persuade someone or intimidate someone, you click that option, and then all of a sudden the screen kind of goes a little gray, and the current player sees a D20 sitting in front of them. It sees the difficulty class of the event. So if you're trying to persuade someone to maybe let you through the door, maybe it'll say like DC 12. It'll say your bonus from whatever stat you're using, wisdom bonus, for example. And then there might be an add bonuses button. And if you're playing multiplayer and you're watching the screen, you can choose to add your own bonuses too. So you can be like, I'm going to give Bardic Inspiration to this, as Kit was just saying. And then you roll the dice and you see the die roll, all the bonuses kick in, and hopefully you beat the DC number. But this is where inspiration can come in, because if you fail, and you can get advantage and roll 2d20 and disadvantage.
Or you can get feats too, like Lucky, which I have.
You can have feats which help in certain rolls. And then if you fail, though, and you have inspiration, it'll say, do you want to spend a point of inspiration to re-roll? And these conversations can really be huge. Like, you really feel invested in them, right?
Yes. I really like them, and it's very D&D where you can basically persuade people and then entirely not have boss fights. I did notice that, I was talking to my sister about this, if in certain times if you miss certain fights, you still get XP for not fighting and persuading them, but you don't always get as much XP as if you just duked it out, and you also obviously don't get the loot that they have. So there is every so often where it's like, I know I could persuade my way out of this, but I need XP and I need your sword. So. Right.
But it can be some really cool stuff. Like, you can get free items from merchants, you can reduce the cost. Like, there's some really interesting things that happen, and many of them are, getting people to join your party or persuading someone not to kill someone you like. There's a lot of really cool, very vested dialogue that gets really. And so what's really interesting when you go into a town, and for some reason in Baldur's Gate 3, and I was just talking to Kit about this because I was playing a little Starfield, which we'll talk about some other time. But Starfield's an amazing game, but I'm spoiled by how dialogue works in Baldur's Gate. Like when you go into a town, you spend a lot of time talking. I'm not thinking to myself like I do in many video games. I can't wait till the dialogue's over and go back to the combat because that's interesting. It's
so fun.
It's so fun. I mean, you're rolling dice. It feels like a heavy role-playing session of D&D where you're using all those non-combat skills, which really seem to matter in Baldur's Gate, and you really feel like you're making progress and having a major impact to the universe.
Yeah. And it's like, some choice games, they have that thing where it's like a character will be like, so-and-so remembers that. You don't need that because every decision you make matters. Everything you say matters.
It does seem like everything
people care
matters.
about everything you say.
And has there been any surprises in the story because of that? Like, we played through the beginning several times, and one of the things Kit and I have both commented on a couple times is like, every time I play through the same beginning 10 hours of the game, I still see something different and new I did miss the last time.
I played with someone right now who doesn't play D&D and has not played with any of this stuff before, and I'm letting him make all the choices because I'm like, go for it. I've done this before. And he does some things that are very, very crazy, and some things where I'm like, I didn't realize we could murder this entire camp and survive. I didn't realize this was an option we were allowed to do. Sometimes you see things and you're like, there's no way the game's going to let me do this. And I was like, oh, okay, right. You can do that.
It doesn't seem to care. Like, there's these major NPCs, as I mentioned earlier, that become your party. Think about Dragon Age or Mass Effect, right? There's multi-party character management, and in combat, you're controlling all the people that are currently in your party. Your party can be 4 people. Once in a while, there'll be an extra person in there for some reason, but generally it's 4 people.
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but there's like non-companions that can join you too. They get smaller little...
Yeah, they get little small pictures. But you can have familiars, you can have summon creatures, but also then every once in a while another NPC they'll join. But there's the main group of folks that the whole game orbits around. They all have backstories, they all have everything. And as I mentioned, you can choose to play one of them or they can just be in your party. But what's interesting is you can kill them all from the very beginning. Like right off the bat if you don't like them. Because we were all playing our separate campaigns, Rose, Kit, and myself, and they were playing together, and we're like, we all find this one person annoying, and so when you first meet him, we're just like, let's just kill him.
Yeah.
And they're out of the game now. They're just gone.
Because everybody has complicated backstories. It is like D&D, where everyone is tragic and edgy to an extent.
Right.
And so we're doing this dialogue option, and I'm like, I could stab this guy with a stake, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that. My sister's like, we've all done this before. Stab him. What could happen? You just stab him. It's like, he's dead.
And it's like, that's cool. And we're like, what? So it's really, that was really fascinating. And I think but let's talk a little bit about the performance of the game. So clearly it lived up to our expectations. It's the closest thing I've ever experienced to D&D in a video game. I mean, it really, what I'm really enjoying is the multiplayer part. And before we get to the multiplayer nuances, how's the performance been? Because you have a laptop that's not like the greatest gaming rig ever or anything. How's it work on that?
My laptop's not happy. It runs, but I have tried turning down the graphics. I have Googled, I have looked up settings, and none of them seem to make it run right. Which isn't a problem. Like, the game functions. It's just constantly a little laggy. And the only time this is an issue is you get to the cutscenes and they're supposed to be either like pans of areas or someone's supposed to be talking, and sometimes they just will stand there and not talk for a solid 10 seconds. Or the pan won't be panning. So you'll just be staring at a torch like, okay. And you kind of have to skip through it sometimes because, like, there's nothing I can do. So I feel like I miss pieces of, like, they put so much effort into this and I don't get to see it. I can't make it work.
Yeah, and you're also in, like, the lower res because you have everything turned down.
And it's like, I wish it would just work. I don't care how low res it is. I'd rather just have it work. If I could turn it down more, I would. But it still functions. The turn-based combat obviously works fine. It's just some of the stuff for some of the scenes it doesn't work.
Yeah, and so one of the things I have like a mid-range laptop, and it works really well on that. Like, it looks great on that. But one of the things we were kind of looking forward to, because the reason we don't have like high-end gaming rigs is we mostly play on consoles.
Yes.
And so we were now originally Baldur's Gate 3 was supposed to launch pretty close to same day on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. They ran into some complexity, and so it launched on PC a little over a month ago, PlayStation this past month, and Xbox got delayed because they're having trouble making it work on both the S and the X or something like that. They're figuring it out, but they're getting closer. What was interesting was we were really excited to try on the PlayStation 5 because Kit and I love ever since you were little. We like to play split-screen couch co-op. Those games are just the best.
They're just fun.
And one of the things that got me super excited about Baldur's Gate was they said on the consoles there will be split-screen couch co-op. And we were like, how are they going to do this? Is it going to be any good? And so we got it on the PlayStation 5, and the other thing that was exciting was that it would run much better than obviously on Kit's laptop too. So what did you think of the split screen on the PlayStation?
I really liked it. They did a good job. I remember Divinity used to have it either on the Xbox or the PlayStation. I don't remember which. But I did play it there, and I was like, it doesn't really work that well. They kind of just took things that were clearly meant for the computer and put it on console, and it doesn't work. But they changed how it works. They changed to set up how things are displayed so that it's easier to access and it actually makes sense in how it works. And it's much more personal when you're following your character and running them around on the screen.
Yeah.
So it's not obviously click. So it's different, and I liked it, honestly. Plus it ran better, obviously, than my computer.
It looks, so a couple things there. The user experience, they completely changed it. So they didn't, to Kit's point, they didn't just take what works on the laptop, which is there's a click bar on the bottom of the screen of the laptop.
Yeah, I
and
know
you
what
can
those mechanics are called.
And yeah, there's a little click bar on the bottom for all your moves, right? Like your bonus actions, your regular actions, spell casting, all that. And then there's another click bar on the left-hand side. So everything's mouse controlled with the computer, right? And that makes it really easy because you can mouse over stuff. It tells you what it does, yada, yada. On the console, I figured it would look the same, but what they did was those click bars are basically gone. So your screen is entirely immersive. You're in the environment. And on the computer, when you walk around, because it's like sort of a top-down view, you click where you want to go.
Yeah.
But on the PlayStation, you just move your joystick and you walk, kind of Diablo-ish.
It's very
really
nice.
But it zooms in really nice and tight. You can zoom in and out with the triggers, so you can really see what's going on. It's much more immersive, like you feel like you're walking around as that person.
You see your character more, so all that character creation.
Right, all that character creation is
it.
totally worth it. But what's cool is it's all radial menus, right? They call them. So you can right bumper, left bumper, and you'll go to these menus and you just move your joystick in a direction to pick all your things. It's a little slower than the mouse, but it's very intuitive. It was easy to figure out. We didn't have to look anything up.
We figured it out.
And we figured I got it working pretty well. The other thing that's really cool is cross-platform saves work.
Yes.
So when you save your game on Steam, it saves it to the cloud because you have to make it a Larian account. And then when you go to your PlayStation, you log into your Larian account and boom, all your saved games are there. So we could just pick up the game we played on the PC or Kick and play her laptop game there on the PlayStation. Now it looks good, plays much better.
And you can switch back and forth, so there's no commitment.
So that's really sweet. Now the other thing that's supposed to be coming, because as I mentioned, our kid sister Rose, she's off at college, right, in Milwaukee, so she's not local, but we've been playing online with her. Supposedly, they're going to have cross-platform multiplayer. So at some point, we're going to be able to play split screen here in the basement on the PlayStation 5, and Rose will be able to jump into that. So I'm excited about that coming eventually.
That'll be fun.
So that's really the other thing that's kind of cool about the multiplayer is it really feels like D&D when your character's all up to mischief. So I was talking to this person in camp, and then all of a sudden I see in the background, right, like it doesn't pause. So when you're having a conversation, this is really interesting how they did this. You're having the conversation. Now the other players in the game, they can see that my character icon has a little ear next to it. You can click it and you can listen to the conversation.
Or you can also click a little button to make private dialogue.
Yes.
So no one else can
So if I am blackmailing someone, I don't want the rest of the party to know this, I can make it private and they can't see it. So they actually don't know what I'm doing. What's even more interesting is if I'm in a conversation, even if it's public, let's say, they can ignore it and go do their own thing. And in the background, I will see what they're doing if they're running behind me. So I'm in camp once chatting with a guy, and all of a sudden, I see Kit's druid wild shape into a cat. And then, Rose is, throwing things at her. And then before we know it, they're goofing around and horse playing in camp. And it was like they were 5 again. I'm like, girl, stop. And they've killed the dog. They've literally
killed the dog.
Killed the dog.
Me.
Irresponsible use of clouded daggers, people. That's what happened.
I was meowing at the dog. And Rose got mad. And
this is happening while I'm having a serious conversation with one of our NPCs about a real moral problem, and they're over there killing the dog. And now the dog's dead. And we have this sort of rule. I was talking to some other friends about this, do you save and roll back everything? And we're kind of like, you know what? It would take forever if every time someone made a mistake. So we're just going to, it's like real D&D. We're just going to go with whatever happens.
See, I'm in my campaign, and I have campaigns where I'm more serious, but in that one, I'm like, whatever happens, happens. And I'd like to say it's mostly my sister's fault when things die.
Yes, which reminds me again of when you guys were younger. Everything's always her fault.
She killed the owlbear, too.
Oh my gosh. There's an owlbear cub.
That's her fault.
And we have tried in 3 different campaigns to save this owlbear cub. If you guys figure out how to save the owlbear cub, let us know. We have not been successful. Have you figured out how to save the owlbear cub
I
yet?
Googled it.
Oh, that sounds like cheating.
Done it.
All right, we've not figured out on our own the owlbear cub. So we've been really impressed by the cross-platform play, really impressed by how it works in the PlayStation 5. So you're going to play on the PlayStation 5 mostly now, right? When you have a chance?
Yeah, so I'm going to do this afternoon.
There you go. And I've been playing on, what I like about it is, as I said, my laptop's strong enough to play it. So when I'm traveling, I can play it on my laptop, or whatever for work. But then when I'm home again, I can pop it up on the PlayStation 5. Very excited. On the Xbox, supposedly, on the Xbox Series X, it will also have split screen.
Do you know when it comes out on the Xbox?
They have not got a date yet, but it's getting closer. On the S, it will not have split screen. And that was the delay, because they thought there was a rule that it had to be exactly the same on both capabilities, and Microsoft said, no, you don't. So they fixed it. Now they're catching up on that. But so basically on the S, there won't be split screen, but you can still play it. On the X, you'll have split screen, which is great, like the PlayStation 5. And then, but cross-platform play is disabled at the moment, but supposedly coming. They haven't given us a date on that either.
Someday.
So I'm excited for that. But in the meantime, we all play on the PCs and still have a great time with that. What's also cool about that, though, is when we play multiplayer on the PC, Kit and I sit in the same room, and so she can watch on my screen.
Yeah.
My cutscene, so she sees it cool and big, and all she does on her computer is just manages herself in combat basically, or runs around and causes mischief and kills dogs.
Mischief that it can do with lag.
And then Rose is a remote on hers, so she's doing that. But we've been having a great time. It is really D&D on the PC.
Yeah, D&D, but video game.
Yeah. So what are you most nervous about? Anything you feel like you're gonna get disappointed? Anything that you think can disillusion you about the game between now and what can they still do wrong?
Okay, so for Divinity, when I played Divinity, the game was absolutely great up until the ending where the fight got really, really hard to the point where they had to patch and fix it. So it's trauma, the fear that's going to happen again, even though, because I don't know how people have gotten to the end. And there's so many choices and ways you can impact yourself. And without spoiling, I'm trying to be a good person. And Baldur's Gate kind of punishes you by being like, well, if you were a bad person, you would get more powers. Everyone in my party's like, how long can you really be a good person for? So I'm afraid that because I'm trying to be a good person, I'm going to have a harder time because I'm not getting the powers and abilities that you could have that are really, really cool because I know them from people who are doing it. But I'm like, so I hope that it's not going to be too hard.
Yeah, me too. But I think we're okay because I've seen some articles. I haven't read any spoilers, but I've seen people posting about speed running the game, getting it done very quickly, and running to the end. So people have solved it. But one thing I would warn everybody about this game, it's a good kind of warning. I'm kind of a completionist. Like I try to do every little thing.
Can't.
I think the only way to completion Baldur's Gate 3 is multiple playthroughs. Not because it locks you out of options. It's just the game is so vast and there's so many nooks and crannies, and you'd have to rewind and play over and over, and it would just make it not fun. I think it's more fun to play through one style, and then through, like Kit's talking about being good, another time being evil, maybe one time, being this kind of a background, another time, it's very different depending on how you experience it.
And you will lock yourself out of things accidentally. It's impossible to not do it. I did it. My sister did it. My dad's done it in our campaign. He doesn't even know it. And it just happens. There's so much stuff that's going on. Any choice you make, it's going to make somebody upset, and you're going to lose conversations with them, or you're going to lose dialogue with them. There's also an important mechanic where you long rest like D&D, and to long rest like D&D you have to have supplies. That's the consequence for long resting. However, all of your companion cutscenes are hidden behind the long rest, and there is a limit to the number of cutscenes you can see per long rest. If you don't long rest enough, the cutscenes will build up, and it will do them in a priority order system.
So you'll miss them.
So you'll miss them, and eventually what will happen is basically you'll get past the point where those cutscenes will make sense, so you will never see them, and you won't be able to advance those relationships with those companions.
And also, I think, I haven't got far enough, but the game definitely gives you a sense that there is a time limit. You have to do certain things in a certain amount of time-ish.
Yes.
And so if you long rest too much, thinking, well, I'm just going to long rest like crazy to see all these cool cutscenes, other bad things might happen.
So it's confusing because you want to have these scenes with your companions, but you also don't have the supplies to rest and see these scenes with your companions.
But if that sounds bad, I don't think of it as bad. I think of it as more like the world is so vast you can't experience it all.
It just makes me sad. I want to talk to everyone.
you play a game, you do what you do. You can play a different instance of the game, and it won't feel like the same game because there'll be other things you see. Sure, some things will be the same, but so much other stuff will be different that it'll feel new, and that's what I've experienced already just going through the first quarter of the first act, maybe.
Not even. Not that far.
First eighth of the first act. I don't even know. It feels like I've done a lot of cool stuff. I'm only level 4, so I guess whatever that's worth. But anyway, having a great time with it. So that's Baldur's Gate. I'm not disappointed in any way.
No, it's great. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. We just can't wait for it is really, the cross-platform saving is really impressive. I love that. There's really very few bugs. Like, it feels very polished.
Apparently, I've heard of bugs. I've seen that they're patching things, but I personally have not had any bugs.
Right.
Or anything game breaking.
And that's how we know people solved it too, because I guess some of the endings were
Yeah.
less, the dialogue was not as satisfying, and they've already called voice actors back and reshot,
There was one of the
re-recorded
endings,
certain
I guess,
scenes.
where if you romance a certain character, she's really tall, and if you're really short, I guess the romance scene didn't match up right, so they had to go back and patch it to fix
Oh, that's
the
one of
height.
my favorite things. Like the way they shoot stature in this game. So in our 3-player game, I'm playing a gnome who's very short, and the way they shoot the screens, Kit's constantly laughing because they shoot. You can definitely tell the stature is like I'm way down there.
I'm also a dragonborn in that campaign, so I'm super, super tall, and one of the dialogue scenes, it's like I'm standing there, and at the bottom of the screen is the dialogue, and you can just see the little gnome head behind the
Even
dialogue.
the
'cause
animations
he's so
for
short.
climbing down, like the gnome will actually sit on his butt and scooch over the edges and stuff, and it just looks hilarious. There's just so much attention to detail. We didn't even get to like, if you get talk to animals, you can literally talk to every animal. If you get speak with dead, talk to freaking everybody. Like there's so much cool stuff you can do and things you can discover, and it all just sort of works. Like all the crazy things you can do in combat, like don't be afraid to use Ray of Frost to put a fire out. Don't be like try all kinds of crazy stuff because it actually works.
It does. The game rewards you for being crazy.
Crazy and creative. Yeah, just like D&D, right? Usually the dungeon master will be like, that's such a crazy idea. I feel like it should work.
And then it does.
It's like the guys that built this game thought of all that stuff, and it's really crazy when you think about the attention to detail. So that's Baldur's Gate, Kit. What would you give it on a... Okay, so the D6G patent pending rating
You
system.
told me this before and I always forget.
Here's how it works. It's the chance, if you roll a D6, it's the chance that any random gamer is going to enjoy this game. So like a 2+ would mean that if you roll a D6, you roll a 2 or better, they're going to like it. So it's a good rating. A 6+ is a bad rating, means you have to roll a 6 to like it.
Okay.
And a 2+ with a reroll is pretty much our best rating.
I feel like 2+ in a reroll. Most people will like this game.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, because you said at the very beginning, before we go here, that you do not like turn-based strategy
No.
games. So you're not like a fan of XCOM and those kind of games. You're much more of a first-person kind of a person.
I don't like long strategic battles, which is ironic. I play D&D.
Right.
I don't.
Well, we are role-playing heavy when we do D&D usually.
I like the role play, and
Yep.
that's why I like Divinity too as well.
Yep. But you're okay with the combat in this game. Like, do you dread it or you like it's actually pretty fun?
I don't dread it yet, but I have heard that it gets way, way harder in Act 2.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it'll be a little bit more difficult, but it's easier for me because I've played D&D for so long that a lot of this stuff is just instinctual. Like, I know
Yeah.
how to play a rogue. I know how to use the cunning action and all that stuff. So
Right.
it's not as hard because the strategic stuff kind of comes more instinctually for this because, like, I've done this for so long.
Yeah, you know all the spells. You know all the... Yeah, you're like, oh, this is a situation where this spell would
In
be
Divinity
great.
2, I'm
this-
like,
yeah.
I don't know how any of this works. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And this is like, oh, it's D&D. I can do this.
Well, I saw you fighting hook horrors the other day, and I'm like, oh, you know how to deal with demons.
Yeah,
Right,
this is
exactly.
fine.
Devils, I know the rules. So it is. So that is definitely. So it's really the D&D part that makes the tactical stuff less annoying
Yes. I don't think there's really no tutorial.
for you. Yeah, we don't need it almost. Maybe it's because we're D&D players. I don't know.
The people I've played with who don't play D&D get very confused.
Okay,
But
that's good.
I don't know if that's just them because I don't play TTRPGs either, so they're like,
That
But
could be.
yeah.
All right, so I would also give it a 2+ to the reroll. I would be very surprised. There's a lot of polish here. There's a lot to like here. The way they do the story, the way you can affect the world. There's a lot that's awesome. There is a difficulty level you can turn way down. So if the combat system is not your jam, it doesn't have to be super hard. Definitely check this game out. This is going to be one of those games that people are going to talk about for a long time. It's a as they say, it's an instant classic. And so there you have it, Baldur's Gate 3.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@thed6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.